everybody. Welcome to the Star Sitdown. My name is Kim Davis Jr., the podcast editor here at the Star, and I am so excited. This is going to be our first podcast for the 2021 school year, and yeah, we're going to be having good conversations, funny, serious. It's really all about educating one another. So for our first guest, we have the wonderful editor-in-chief of the University Star, Jaden Edison. Jaden, how's it
Great.
going, man?
Hey, I'm living the dream, doing my thing, and everything in between. That's the motto.
Dude, good, man. So tell me, obviously we've had a bunch of conversations over the summer about the podcast, getting things going, the transition, everything's been on Zoom. Dude, what has that been like for you in transitioning from obviously when I got hired here in March, this is when really everything started. And,
Right.
we had to change all the positions and you got put on as editor in May. So what has that been like for you going everything online and trying to do this position?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been a big adjustment in that usually, when you take over a position like this, you have the year or not the year, but the summer essentially to build that in-person camaraderie with your team. I mean, this position, it really is rooted in a lot of trust, right? Like you have a vision, you come in and you're sort of trusting, the people that you hire in those respective positions to sort of help you bring that vision to life. And without that in-person component, it's been a lot challenging to adapt to a lot of things. Been just everything being through Zoom, on phone calls, and for the people, there were some people that returned to our staff that I had already been able to establish a relationship with. But that was great. But a lot of other, positions, it wasn't the case. So that was a big adjustment. But as far as the content and the job itself, I mean, I just took the approach of this is just what it is, so you got to sort of make the best of it. And that was also a part of my pitch to the advisory committee who eventually chose me to be editor in chief, was that I understand sort of what's going on, and I feel like I'm in a position to where I can help us sort of navigate through it. So it's just been a big adjustment in that area, but I mean, it's just it is what it is. That's sort of how I feel about it now, and you just sort of make the best of it. But I do think the way we've sort of handled it has been, I couldn't have asked for, a better, transition considering the circumstances. So, I mean, it's been weird, but I mean, you just take it day by day and you figure it out. And, you sort of believe in your capabilities and the vision. The hand has not been easy along the way, but you just sort of take it for what it is and take it day by day. So that's sort of been my approach, throughout the whole thing, but yeah, just, man, you just sort of roll with the punches. That's sort of been my philosophy with it. And I think, I'm still grateful for the opportunity to sort of be here and do what we do here. So that's the biggest thing.
I think you're right, and you do kind of just have to go with the punches. It was kind of difficult, in terms of everybody, bro, I haven't met you in person yet. That's mind-boggling, and everything. And it's insane because this is all I know about the Star, through Zoom, and how I met everybody is through Zoom. And I'm very curious as to what it's going to be moving forward. My theory is, honestly, is that we are probably going to go back to online by October. Do you think that's the legitimate estimation of time?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's different because, talking to some university officials throughout the summer, the university was very adamant about bringing students back to campus. I remember, being in conversations with, President Trout, and just initially, President Trout, she got word from students, at least what she told me, was that students didn't like being online. That was what the administration was hearing back in the spring semester. So the whole plan was bring students back, and the face masks really increased when it came to the administration. It was we have all this new research that shows the effectiveness of face masks. So if every student can put a face mask on, then we'll be okay. So that was sort of the message that we were getting from the administration, President Trout, so on and so forth. As far as a time, I really don't know. I mean, we've had an increase in cases since we've been back at school compared to the summer, but it's also not to the magnitude that other schools were witnessing when they first got back, such as North Carolina and Michigan State. and so on and so forth. And that's at least through what the university is reporting. That's what we know right now. So, man, I don't know. It really is tough. Like, I know the university genuinely, they want this thing to work out just from having those conversations. I mean, but COVID-19 is unpredictable. So it's,
Yeah.
You can have all these wishes and thoughts and whatnot, but ultimately you got to stick to what the facts are. And if the facts show eventually that, if cases start to rise on campus and conditions are unsafe, then the responsible thing to do, on behalf of the university and the university community is you're going to have to make that decision, to keep students out of harm's way. So, me personally, I want to be like in person, but at the same time, I want to be safe. So I understand that. And I'm not, I'm more of a realist in that. I'm going to look at the numbers and the facts to sort of dictate how I move and how I go about things. And until we get that vaccine, it's really hard to keep students safe because students have their different tendencies to want to do what they want to do. You get house fatigue, and then then you want to go see this person, and just a lot going on. We're young, we want to be active, and that's just in the nature of like who we are as people. So yeah, man, it's a lot, but I don't know. I guess we'll just have to continue to see. I have to see it to believe it, for us to make the online switch right now. It seems like right now, through this first week of school, and through these first couple weeks of school, it'll just be a thing of watching and seeing how those cases rise, and from there, we'll see what happens.
I mean, I think a big sentiment that like a lot of people like at Texas State have been having is like that disconnect, that like the disconnect between like the administration and the students. Because I know a lot of people from like my conversations that like a lot of people feel like the school doesn't really care like about them and their safety. I know that their actions, like the roadmap to the return, all these different things, like they're trying to make it seem like they do care. But like a lot of people, they just feel like the school is really in it for money. And, they're not really, they're prioritizing money over safety. Now, I have had the same conversations you've had with like the administration, trials, all these different people. But like, do you feel like that sentiment is like valid, and are they like taking that into consideration?
Yeah, I think everybody's sort of entitled to their own opinions and whatnot. And, my job, one, as journalists, right, I'm never gonna get into the hey, you're wrong, and like and this is in regards to dealing with talking to the administration and through interviews and whatnot. I'm always gonna be truthful with how students are feeling, right? So when we get in these interviews with President Trout and Provost Bourgeois and Lisa Lloyd, you can go on and on up the administration ladder. I'm always gonna be upfront with what the students are talking about, and the students have had that concern that maybe the university is afraid that it's going to lose out on a lot of money, right? Like the university was initially expecting an 8% drop in enrollment, which results in a loss of millions of dollars, right? So there is money at stake there, and when I asked President Trout, she told me that money is never a factor in when it comes to this situation. This is solely, what's best for students. That's what I was told.
Okay.
But like I said, at the same time, the facts are the facts. And if you're anticipating dropping enrollment, you're losing out on millions of dollars. That's valuable money that would go toward, whether it's people's salaries or all these other different things. The university is in a hiring freeze right now, right? So there is a lot at stake with, COVID-19 and with everything going on. So, I mean, you just look at the facts. The university is losing out on a lot of money by not having students on campus. So, I mean, I'm not going to get in the area and say that I think the university brought students back solely because of that reason. But I mean, the facts say that. I mean, that's a part of the thinking in bringing students back to campus is trying to make sure that the university can stay afloat, right? And at the same time, I'm sure there also might be a balance, right? Of, some students want to be in person, right? So I think, it goes both ways, but really, here's the thing I will say though, is that with the administration, no matter what decision the administration makes, there's always going to be a side of people that agree with it and people that don't. There was this whole battle during the summer of, hey, President Trump, you need to close down Alcac Library. And there were other people that saying, no, leaving it open is the right decision because you have students who don't have those resources at home, the internet and computers and Wi-Fi and access and all those different things. So there is a battle of, there have been scenarios where, you have to sort of look and from the perspective of the administration and say, okay, like this is a really tough decision. But at the same time, right, the administration has to look at things for what they are, right, and look at the facts. And if the numbers tell you that it's not safe to have students back on campus and the cases are continuing to rise and deaths continue to rise, then you need to stick to what the science is, right? So that's sort of where I am, across that. But like I said, as a journalist, my thing is when talking to the administration, I am always going to bring forth what the students are talking about. And I'm going to be real about it. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
I like your point of view in that, like, I feel like today too many people are like one side or the other and they just stick with that. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Like, you presented like some new information to me about like the freeze and the 8%. I had no idea. I bet a lot of people didn't know that either. So I think there is a level like of understanding you have to be like in the middle and like, hey, this is affecting students, but this is also affecting the school and like budgets and everything like that. And what sucks about all this is like it's such an unprecedented time. Like it's insane. Like we haven't had to like deal with anything like this, and it's crazy to be honest. Because I remember, like, I was in middle school when Ebola happened, and I remember that, and like everyone like made jokes and everything, and we're like and then like in January, like it's a completely different world now. And if you told me in January that this would be like the new normal, I would believe you, but I'd be like, man, like really? You know what I'm saying?
Right. You got to see it to believe it.
Dude, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I think it was in one of like the quad talks, like earlier in the year, that like you saw like all the people like, man, like it's not gonna reach here. Like it's in Seattle. Like, we're the United States. We're gonna have it under control. And I think it's crazy, man. Like genuinely. How has like this pandemic affected like you and your mental health and having to stay inside and do a lot of things remotely throughout the summer?
Yeah, I would say I'm a little different in regard. Like I've always been one of those people that sort of just make the best of the situation, right? Like that's sort of how I was. Like I played sports in high school, right? So like we would go through these like terrible off seasons and things of that nature where it was so hard. Like I'm telling you, like hard. Like me and some of my best friends still laugh about it today. Like it was difficult. So like, but that time like allowed me to sort of, you know, learn more about like myself and like what I can handle and whatnot. I know it sounds a little like cliche and like maybe like a little corny, but genuinely, like I think, being able to go through that like throughout my high school years, like it really helped me with like the mindset that I have now. So like the pandemic it didn't really change how I felt like mentally or anything. It was just the thing of like it is what it is. You do what you got to do,
Mm-hmm.
And through the pandemic there were some highs too. I mean, like getting this position like that happened during the pandemic. Being awarded different scholarships and stuff like that. Like those were like great things that happened, right? So I had a birthday in the pandemic, like June 13th. So it was, stuff like that. You still have like these little highlights throughout it. But it hasn't really, it didn't negatively impact my mental health or anything. It was just an adjustment, but I've always been, or at least since, maybe high school, genuinely, I like, I try to look at things like in a positive light. It's like, all right, we got this pandemic. How can I find a way to be like productive, like throughout this time? And for that, I mean, for me, it's just been, really it's just virtual. Now, I will say like the spring semester was difficult, right? The latter half of it, doing everything online. That was the biggest challenge because you're also trying to balance the star where news is more crucial now more than ever. So it's like trying to manage that and also be a student and stay on an equal level. That was the biggest challenge, but we figured it out, right? So it just shows you that all this stuff is possible to sort of navigate through. But I would say, yeah, my mental health, and it's been just the same in that just trying to look at everything in a positive light. Obviously, a lot more phone calls and FaceTimes and Zoom meetings more than I ever imagined I would ever do. But I'm okay with that sometimes. And then if whatever you can do safely, you try to do it and do it as safe as possible. So yeah, it hasn't negatively impacted at all. It's just been more of an hey, this is what it is now. All right, let's make the bet. Let's go get it. Right. That's what my old coach Chip Baker used to say. Go get it. Like that's sort of my approach to it. So.
Hmm. Well, another thing too, like I'm very curious about you, because like in the conversations we had, like you're a very like fascinating person to me personally. Like
I appreciate it.
you're the second black editor in chief at the Star, and like one of the things I think about like when it comes to you and like when I hear you and like the meetings that we have is like, do you feel like that pressure, like in terms of like being the second black editor and like like us being black people, like one kind of represents all of us in a sense. Like if you did a bad job, a lot of people would be like, well, I mean, they would take your skin color into account as opposed to like if you were a white person, So do you feel that pressure, especially after you have a good relationship with Carrington and you're very close to him, the first black editor? Do you feel that?
Yeah, I don't think it's more. I don't think it's necessarily pressure from maybe a little bit with the second black editor in chief. And that's actually something I was talking about in the letter that I wrote to like the audience and whatnot for our back to school week. Yeah, I talked about that a little bit in there, but I think it's more so pressure being the second black editor in chief during the time we're in now, right? Like I think if you didn't have everything that was going on with the murder of George Floyd, the most recent Jacob Blake situation and Ahmaud Arbery and all the countless other situations that have happened, then I think it wouldn't feel as intense. And I say that in like a good way because it's not backing away from like I don't feel like I'm not doing anything out of the ordinary. Like I'm not trying to I'm not faking it along the way. Like everything that I'm doing here is like genuine, out of genuine care for the organization, for black people, and so on and so forth. So you always want to be able to set other black students and other black leaders up, for success after you leave. But really, with these situations that have gone on, it's sort of expedited the process in that, there's a demand for things now like faster than they would have happened. Usually at the Star, right? The summer is a time where content slows down. You're able to, there's more of a learning time, right? Like you're gonna make some mistakes, but they're so subtle because nobody's around town. Like you're publishing probably one thing a week, and then not including breaking news and whatnot. So you're able to learn, you're able to slow down. You're able to have that in-person interaction with everyone. When we started off, in May 1st, the first thing I put out was the first black documentary, right? It was a documentary highlighting three first black leaders in three big organizations on campus, including the Star, which was Carrington Tatum, Corey Benbow for student government, and Raven Ammons, Texas State Shredder. So you started off with that, and that was huge. And then you get to the end of May, and then you have the murder of George Floyd. And right away, it's like, oh, wow, like this is like absolutely bizarre. And then it got to this thing where usually these things have happened in recent years, where it's like a situation like Trayvon Martin or Mike Brown or Eric Garner, and the list goes on, situations happen. But these aren't things that necessarily the Star is going to cover, right? Like
Yeah.
these are things that, they're on, they're in Ferguson, they're in Florida and all these other places. But the Star is so focused on this like hyper local like community is going to focus on San Marcos, Hayes County, Texas State. Well, this time around things changed drastically, right? Like these things were happening so often, and they continue to happen like as we speak, that people were tired everywhere, and it became a time of reckoning where people were going to check the people within their local jurisdictions and their state governments and so on and so forth. So you get that, and I never forget, like we had a Friday meeting. We call them our budget meetings. We had a Friday meeting the week that George Floyd was killed, and I just wanted to have a conversation with the team about it. Because I was thinking and I was seeing sort of the protests that were happening everywhere across the country, outside of Minneapolis, where the murder happened. And I was in my head, I was like, if this thing comes to San Marcos and there's a protest that happens in San Marcos, we got to address it. There's no way around it. Like we have to be out there and we have to cover it from top to bottom. And just so happened, the very next day we get in that meeting, we start the conversation, we get a tweet from someone who said something along the lines of, the University Star been hiding. They ain't said nothing about the George Floyd situation and blah blah blah. Are y'all scared? Are y'all part of the problem too? And for me, I'm like, oh, you got me messed all the way up, right? Like I'm like what? Like, do you know? Like literally, there was literally a feeling like I'm not, I'm like a black editor in chief, right? Like that doesn't happen very like this affects me personally the way it affects you as well. And this is a black student that tweeted us. So from there, for me, that was a time where it was like, okay, like people really want to know, what's going on in the community. They want us to be on top of it. And you go back to the whole point of pressure. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like you do start to feel that because it's like these things are happening, and you're trying to learn, but at the same time, you got to be on top of it all. And then you get to the internal part of it is like you have to address 100+ years of like institutionalized like systemic racism within this own like organization, right? Like this organization is not perfect at all. You talk about 2 black editor-in-chiefs, and the paper's been around since 1911. Like that's unacceptable. So you feel that pressure in regard to, you got a pandemic going on, you got the ongoing fight against racism going on, and then you got the biggest election of our lifetime that's about to happen in November. And you're a black editor-in-chief during this time, and you're the one that has to get it right.
Yeah.
There's pressure that comes along with that, but at the same time, it's that same mentality of, all right,
it is what it is.
It's time to go get it now. Okay,
Yeah.
That one tweet that they sent me, that fired me up more than ever to be like, okay, like
did they at you or did they at the Star?
It was the Star.
Oh, okay, got it.
And I responded to the tweet from my own account and was like, with all due respect, we ain't hiding from nothing. That's pretty much what I was saying. We're not hiding from anything. Like we're gonna be covering. We're gonna make a statement about the George. We're gonna go out and cover the protest that's about to happen. And I forgot to mention that the person that tweeted it had also organized a protest the same day. So I saw that, and then I was like, okay, yep, we're out there. And moving forward, this is what we're doing. So that was a learning curve in that, just because something's in Minnesota or Minneapolis, or something's in Florida or wherever, like, if it's something that really impacts the community, then that's something that you can also cover. I was just in this mindset that like, just because we're so focused on Texas State San Marcos, like if it doesn't come here, then we're not, then maybe it's not something that we cover. But time showed that this is impacting everybody, so it became a part of our agenda too at the start to make sure that we covered it appropriately.
How do you? Because obviously we saw everything around the nation. I saw the pictures you took at said protest, and it was really empowering that like a lot of people, especially in our age group, have become so active and vocal. Like I was talking to my dad about like all this stuff going on, and he was telling me like your generation is like built different. Like y'all will go up to like police officers and like yell in your faces, and like y'all aren't scared. Like we would not have done that, back in the 80s or when we were young. And like I'm just curious, I want to get your point of view as to what do you think we have to do going forward? Like obviously we've seen these protests. My point of view, I think a lot of these looters and what a lot of people have been focusing on, or were focusing on rather, were just like anarchists and like people opportunists, because we're in a pandemic, unemployment is at a high. Obviously people are going to be trying to steal. So where do you think we need, or what do you think rather we need to do to go forward, especially as young people and as journalists?
Yeah, I mean that's the $1 million question, I think, isn't it? It's like, and that's sort of something that I've actually struggled with. Is like, I was talking to people who were protesting back in this was a June protest, I want to say. Like there was 1 week where there were like 4 or 5 protests like that week. So like I was out there and we were just having casual conversations with some of the people who were demonstrating. And I was asking them, just because I was curious for myself as well, is like, the first thing when it comes to the first thing is trying to bring awareness, right? So you think about like Colin Kaepernick, like by kneeling, he brought awareness to the situation. Even the people who didn't like what he was doing, he brought awareness to it, and that he was kneeling for against police brutality. So you bring awareness to the issue, you get out, you start protesting, and you make more noise, and you do what you need to do in order to bring even more awareness to the issue. Then it's like from there, then what happens? Are you depending on like congressmen and women to fix the issues? Is it the elections or whatever? And from there, there's a space of people who just have a genuine distrust in like government. And things have not changed, right? Like, I mean, you talk about whether it's the Republican, Democrat, whatever it might be, like things, a lot of people feel that the political system has not done them any justice. So, Martin Luther King, his whole, he had a quote that says, a riot is the language of the unheard. And like a lot of the riots and things that were happening, I think, there was, likely, some level of a good portion of it, like like you were talking about, like anarchists and whatnot. But some people who were just, also there were people who were just frustrated, right? Like people who just have had enough, and it's like, we've done everything. You wanted us to peacefully protest. We've been peacefully protesting for over 100 years, and
Yes.
nothing has changed. So like, what do we do now, right? So that's sort of that. Man, it really. But it's going back to the question of where do we go from here. I mean, it really is tough because, man, like, I mean, you could say stuff like education, you could say stuff like protesting or whatever it is, but these things have been happening and things have not changed. And you could talk about getting out the vote, and that's the big thing now. Making sure you're getting out to vote during these elections to really push that change. Which I think to a certain extent, like voting is important. Like I don't want to get that mixed. Like
Yeah.
at from a state level, from a county level, electing county sheriffs and prosecutors and so on and so forth. Like those things are like really important. There's more that needs to happen, and these things are like so like systemic, right? These things are so rooted in like who we are as like a nation that there's nothing that we can undo in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? Like, man, like you're talking about 400 plus years of like systemic racism, and there are conversations now of like this generation, we feel like we have to undo. Well, I mean, we need to undo all of it, but it's such a large task and something that's going to take a lot longer than it's going to go beyond us being alive, right? It's going to go into our kids, and it's going to be a battle they're going to continue to fight. But it really is hard, and that's something that I'm still trying to figure out myself. Is like, where do we go? Because I mean, even you talk about some of the things that have happened this summer. All the you would think that after all these protests, after everything that's happened, the calls to allocate funds, take some funds away from the police and put them toward other places like education and whatnot, you would think that these things, police officers and institutions would be like, okay, we're going to get it right. And then the other day you see the shooting of Jacob Blake.
Yeah.
And it's like,
How did you initially react? Like when I saw that video, like I heard you say it the other day, like you only watch it once. I can only watch it once just because like it gets so old. It gets really tiring, seeing this over and over again. And I'm saying that obviously like as a black man, because it feels different. I feel like when you could see yourself in that situation, when it's
right.
not just like, man, I can't believe this happened to him. It's more of like that could happen to me. Like, you know what I mean? So what was your immediate reaction upon seeing that?
Yeah, and Jacob Blake in particular, yeah, it was really, I saw it on my phone, and I really just looked at it, and once I saw it, it was just like I just shook my head, like it was more of like an internal, like a, dang, like,
Yeah.
like that sort of and it's just sad, right? Because I mean, you look like seeing the George Floyd video, like that one was like, man, like just sitting there watching that, like it
I was
almost
angry.
makes you angry. That's what I was about to
Yeah,
say.
I
It
was
makes you
angry.
angry inside, and then you see this, and it's like we literally it's like one of those things like when you're like you tell it like when your parents tell you something once, and then you do the same thing over again, and then they yell it, like that's how it's feeling. Like we just told you, we just had this conversation. So
Yeah.
what are we not getting right now? So that was sort of more of that feeling. Then seeing the things, seeing the demonstrations in the sports leagues like the NBA, and then seeing some of the analysts talk about it, like just hearing some of those things, it was just like it's more frustrating, man. It's like, man, we all summer people have been out in the streets protesting, and they've been in their respective organizations, demanding change, and there's been a reckoning across every institution you could think of. And this, then you just it's like you think you're taking 10 steps forward, like people are finally like beginning to get it, and then this happens, and it's like, well, start all over again. So
One thing I'm very, very happy about is that he's alive. I think that's
Right.
huge, and he can have his
Changes the
story told.
narrative.
Yeah, it does a lot, and I think at the time we're recording this, we don't know like what's gonna happen, how his recovery is gonna be. We know he's paralyzed, but this we're recording this days before. But I'm really excited to hear what he has to say and what type of stuff can come from this because I don't really know how you can fix like this type of situation in terms of policing. I know like we can talk about like qualified immunity in the courts and unions and their impact on policing, but I mean to give you some background, like both my parents were cops. Like they were both sergeants. And like, you know, now it's like obviously I never wanted to become a cop. And now like I'm seeing cops differently. And it's really hard to maintain like in the middle, because at the same time like I'm angry, and like even my parents, like if I was to get pulled over, they would fear for my life. And both of them were cops. So it's really hard in the situation and like genuinely I don't know how we could fix a problem like this. You know what I'm saying? I definitely know it's not going to happen under this president. So I mean we'll have to wait and see, but like it's crazy, man.
No, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's tough. And then you talk about sort of being a journalist, right? Where, there's, first of all, the journalism, when you're going to journalism school, they try to teach you this whole notion of like objectivity, like this false notion that you could somehow not show any bias toward anything. So as a black man, you expect me to see something like the murder of George Floyd and report that down the middle. Like what? Like there's this whole notion. So that's been challenged. And a lot of newsrooms are having these conversations of like what objectivity really means and what fairness really means and all these different things. So those are a lot of things that you think about during these times. But and it's been a roller coaster, and like I haven't, I followed the Trayvon Martin case, or the case and the George Zimmerman trial. Like I watched the trial. I was in Chicago that summer. I watched the trial every single day from sun up to sundown. I was watching like the after shows, like with Nancy Drew and Anderson Cooper, and I was like, I followed that and I saw that, like that was like my O.J. Simpson case, like for like that generation. Like, this for me, there was a Trayvon Martin case. You see all that, but even like seeing that, like I've never seen anything like what's happening right now, like as far as the reaction. Because I mean, you had, in Missouri, with Mike Brown and Ferguson, you saw the protests and whatnot, and you saw, the clashes with police and all those things. But it seemed like and I'm sure there are things that were happening everywhere else, but it just seemed like it was very like relative to like Ferguson.
Yeah.
But now it's just everywhere. And San Marcos is happening, right? Where it's like people are fed up and people are, they're, and until the problem get fixed, it's going to continue. People are going to continue to raise hell, right? And that's sort of it. You almost start to think like, what is the other alternative? Because the same things have been happening time after time.
No, yeah, I agree. It's like the people that say like peaceful protesting is the way. It's like that's not going to do anything if they know like you can just be quiet and like they could just keep doing what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? Like obviously I feel like the people that say like the government isn't going to do anything like with them destroying stuff or being really loud about it. It's like, bro, if you like get in their faces and be like, hey, like we can affect you, like they're gonna have to change. You know what I mean? So obviously, like I'm a big fan of peaceful protest, but to an extent, like peace can only make so much change. There has to
Yeah.
be a little push. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, and I think the biggest thing is just like people are gonna respond how they respond to these situations. Like you're talking about people's fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, family members, best friends, like getting killed, like by police. And this is not new. Like this has been happening forever. So it's not like this is the first time this happened. This is a rare occurrence, and it's like, why is everybody responding this way? Like no. If you don't know why people are responding the way they're responding now, then that's just like willful, like ignorance at this point. I mean, and there's a person in a place of privilege or a person in place of power should not be telling people how they should and should not respond to something. Like, I mean, you can make the argument, you can have whatever feelings you have about people, looting and doing all these other things, and whether it's setting someone on fire. Like, you can have your different, like, people are entitled to their opinion, but you do not have the right to tell people how they should and should not be responding when you haven't been impacted the way they've been impacted, right? Like, that's one thing that I've just seen, is that there's a misunderstanding that, like I said, it's different, right? If somebody within the Black community says, hey, I don't think this is the way we should go about it, that's a conversation that people within the Black community can have, right? Like, you're gonna have that conversation. But for someone who's been living up in the hills, who hasn't been impacted by these things, who was raised, in a wealthy family, or if not raised in a wealthy family, even if, you're talking about a family that may have been impoverished, but they still have the privilege, right, to maneuver through that and come back from those harsh circumstances. If you've been through that, then you are not in a place to tell Black people and people in marginalized communities how they should and should not be feeling, or how they should and should not be responding. Everybody's responding in their own way. And these things have been happening for so long that it's like, it is a thing of like, how are we supposed to respond, right? And that's not me. I'm not saying that I support people looting, or I am all in on just the act of peaceful protest. What I'm saying is people have the right to feel how they feel and respond how they respond. And that's just the sort of way I approach it. Like, I'm not gonna condemn anybody for responding the way they respond, because that's the way they feel. And I mean, it's justified either way. This is, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years of wrongdoing, oppression, prejudice, discrimination, slavery, like whatever you want to call it, right? Like, these things have been going on forever. So, now people have just had enough, and they're responding the way they see fit.
And to piggyback on what you said, I don't like, obviously I don't want people to, like, loot and do all these things, but like you said, like, you have a right to feel this way. Like, you have a right to be angry and react however you want to react, And I don't think people in positions of power should be able to take that from, the people that are reacting, especially like you said, like, this isn't like new. Like, this has been happening and happening and happening. This was just the last straw. And it was very interesting in, like, my time, or not necessarily my time, but like when this was happening in the moment, seeing the different sides of the media coverage of this, like, event. And, like, there are people on the right who are, like, really against it, and, like, what are you guys doing? Like, why are you doing this? This is wrong. And, like, there were some people, not necessarily going to say outlets, but some people were trying to say, he had it coming, look at his past, this, that, and the other, which I can't stand. I don't like that at all. But it was just so fascinating seeing how polarizing, and it really revealed a lot of people's true colors in my eyes. And I'm thankful I didn't have a lot of people I had to, like, cut out of my life, but there were some where I was like, you're not, like, why, you shouldn't be on the fence about this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, it's tough, right? And like, for me, I was able, being in the Woodlands, Texas, like around high school, Oak Ridge High School, it was a very diverse. I played sports, right? So our football team was, like, very diverse, and, like, some of my best friends growing up were white people, and some, and others were Black or Hispanic or whatever it may be. But these are people who were raised in way different circumstances than how I was raised and how other people were raised. And then you get to times like these, you establish these relationships, and then you see something problematic, right? And it's like, you don't know how to really feel, because it's like, I know you, like, we've spent so much time together. Like, I know, like, deep down, like, you're a good person. I don't know if you're confused. Like, you get into that battle of, like, man, like, is this something that I just need to genuinely sit down with this person and, like, explain, or is it just like they're just like, it's, you see what I'm saying? Like, there's that internal battle of, like, so I definitely see what you're saying. That's been a tough thing, for me, is just seeing some, because I mean, I've had people that I know that some that I, like, really close with, some people that come to my birthday dinners every year, right? Like, stuff like that, who you see, might say something problematic along those lines, and it's like, really, like, it's almost like a betrayal. Like, it feels like, it's like, I thought you were
I get
different. I
you.
thought you were better than that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's tough. And then at the same time, I think I'm black people were naturally like we're forgiving. Like we were almost like made to be compassionate individuals. Like you're talking about 400 years of oppression and slavery and wrongdoing, and we still try to find a way to like contribute to society, and we still like love this country, and in some ways it doesn't always like love us back. Like we're built that way. So like for me, it's like you see that and it's like, okay, like I'm gonna try to like put this aside. Like I know like we've always had good experiences together. I know you've always respected me. You've always invited me into your household to spend time with your family. At the same time, then you see it and you just keep thinking about it. It just bothers you. It's like I just can't be associated with that. You know?
Yeah, I feel you. I had to like some of my friends, like my white friends who I've been friends with for a long time, and like they hadn't really spoken out, and like, I just asked them straight up, like, why haven't you said anything? And some people were like, I don't really feel like I have to, like I shouldn't have to. And I was like, okay. And then there were others where there was like, hey dude, like I just genuinely don't really know what to do. If you could help me, like I'd love to, but I just wasn't confused. I didn't know like if I had a place or if I should stay out of it. And I feel like that's the difference, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean you're right, and it's like that the whole notion of like silence is compliance. During times like these. So some people, they take the time, they might not say anything, and they feel like by not saying anything, then they're not a part of the problem, right? Which now, you know, the way I mean, you talking about sort of how we change this. I think, like I said, I don't have the answer, but I think part of it at some point has to be that the oppressors, like the people within these communities that aren't being affected by these things, have to speak out, right, and support you know these communities like the Black community and the Latinx community and all these other communities that have been marginalized for so long. Like it's going to take that because for white people to check their counterparts and check their peers and check their family members and have those conversations and say, hey, the way you're going about this is like the way you think right now is not appropriate. It's not acceptable. And like they have to have those conversations internally like for that to happen. So I will say like as much negative that's come out of it, like from a standpoint of like people that you thought were one way and changed, I would say like the friends who've like just further proven what you had already believed about them of like them being genuine and solid people, that's also increased as well. Where it's like, man, like people who I've always loved, and then now you see them stepping out and saying, "Oh hell, I'm with you 100%. I'm riding with you." Like,
Yeah.
friend text me talking about something. I'm gonna protest with you if you trying to go do that. Like that makes you feel good too, and that just for me that gives me a little bit of hope that this thing does move forward. I remember it's a little small anecdote, but I was seeing a video. I think this is the one, and I'm not a very like emotional. If I get emotional, it's probably gonna be more internal, right? Like I don't really show it very well. But the one time I would say throughout this whole situation where it did start, like I was like almost like brought me to tears, was like watching the situation in Flint, and there were the white officer in Flint. He was around all the Black folks in the community, and he was like, "Hey, I'm here. I know they're doing this there, but I'm here with you, and I'm about to, I will. This doesn't mean I will march with you. I'm gonna be here with you, and so on and so forth." And I just saw it, and I was like, "Bro, that's literally all we're asking for is that you just like, you're never gonna understand because you're not a part of it, but like try to understand, like try like put in the effort to really see like what the underlying like issue is and help us address it." Like seeing that was like, man, like that's when I was like, damn, like that's really all. That's literally doing that can mean so much, but it just doesn't happen because people are stuck in their own bubbles, and that's sort of what we're seeing right now and throughout this country. So
I think that's one of the great things about this. Obviously, there's a lot of negativity, and it's hard to try and be optimistic during like this time, especially like with all the racism and seeing all these different pods and people like in denial. It is really encouraging to see like a lot of people are like, oh, like I understand more now. Like last year I would have never thought about it this way, and now it's like, dude, like I get it. And I think the national conversation about race has definitely taken a huge step forward. I think those are some of the big things I think that are the good that came from the bad, and I can't remember if that's the video I saw, but I did see some videos like that, and it was really comforting. But then there were also some where it's like the cops they would like do something one day with like the people, and then the next day they would be just back to the way they were. So I mean, it's really tough. Hopefully we could take more steps forward in the future. I mean, I'm curious, like, did it really like shock you? Because earlier in the summer, when all of this stuff was happening, you like, talked to the black staff at the Star, and I'm not gonna say like the number, but it's very small. It's not very big. And when I saw, I was like, Jesus, like this is it, Like this is crazy. And then you look at like how many people are at the Star and you're like, this is insane. Like I would have never known, how should we go about like bringing more black people and more diversity to the Star moving forward?
Yeah. Well, I think the number it was like 8
I didn't
whenever
want to
we
I
had that
didn't want to
meeting.
say it. I didn't know if I
Nah,
should say it like on
that
air,
was
but
like
yeah.
Nah, it was like 8 whenever that happened. Whenever we had that meeting, but yeah, I mean it's crazy. I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? I mean, that's something that you talk about. You talked about the pressure thing earlier. Like I think you do feel it in that regard, and that I'm not going to be here. I know I'm only going to be here for a year, right? Like when May 1st comes around next year, like my term is up, and I got to graduate and I got to move on with my life and do what I do. But from a legacy, like you get to this point now, like being at the Star. I've been at the Star since January 2018. Like you've been here this long, now you start getting the thoughts of like legacy, right? Like going into that last year, like this is the last time to sort of leave behind a legacy, right? And it could be something that people remember in like good context, or are you going to be remember somebody who didn't address the issues at hand? So like there is pressure in that regard. But as far as like bringing more black students here, I mean it, you know, has been the whole battle in that there's a lot of different factors, right? I mean, you look at the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, which is what I always said is that most of your students that work at the Star are going to be journalists within like the mass communication journalism field up at SJMC, and the SJMC doesn't have the faculty that reflect sort of reality, right? Like if all the faculty, if Dr. Lloyd Fluker is the only black woman, the only black person, on your team that can relate to black students, like that's an issue, and that's something I've always said. And that has an impact on people. Like I had Dr. Fluker for a class, and seeing her talk about the importance of student media and see how passionate she was about it was sort of a factor in me even like coming to join the Star. It's not the only factor, but it was a part of it. So there are black students who are going to come and won't have that experience, and there may be black students who come through SJMC and learn about this field and what it's about, and they may say, hey, there is no space for me. Like this seems very white. This seems very odd. Like this isn't for me. I'm gonna go somewhere else. I'm gonna go somewhere else where I feel like I'm represented properly. So that has an impact on it. But as far as us, there's talking to I've had these conversations with sort of Carlrington before, and just doing that, and a lot of it does come down to active recruitment, right? And going out and finding people and having these conversations, like the same conversations we're having, like same conversations, out there with the community and different organizations, and also the content matters too, right? Like what content are we producing that accurately reflects like this community? That's why the first Black documentary was so important. There's something that I'm so happy with, to this day, that documentary and what all went into it and what it sort of means. I think it even means more now than it did whenever it came out in May. But that's why things like that are important, right? Like, those are all things that the Black students see. And when they, feel that they can come in and find a way to succeed and whatnot, then I think they'll be more willing, to do that. But it does come down to active recruitment, and it's a challenge, right? I mean, like you talk about the pandemic, like me actually getting to go out and actually talk to people in person on campus at organization meetings, which are not happening in person, and things of that nature. Like, that's that. But also, I think you can get in the area of like you can almost feel that could like almost feel like in this position you have so much going on that you can have a tendency to let that be an excuse, right? Like you have the thought in the back of your head where it's like, this is such a big issue that I know I need to address, But since we got the pandemic, that's an excuse for me. Like there's nobody in person. Like I don't have to. I'll figure it out whenever it comes. But it's been an internal battle for me, and like you only have so much time. So that's something that we do have to address, and it's something that I have to really as we move as we get going here for this fall semester, is to really get out there, and whether it's virtual meetings or wherever you encounter and you talk to the Black students, but really having these conversations. So that's something that we're gonna have to take on, and the Black students that we do have here, like you and others that are might be younger, like creating that lane, to do stuff like we're doing right now, and stuff like that. And after I leave, my hope is that it continues to roll on, and we have that established, right? Because Carlrington was the first Black editor, editor in chief. He hired me when he was an opinion editor in 2018. So, and he's helped me. He was the one that advocated for me to be assistant multimedia editor, and then when he left, that that helped me get up to multimedia editor, and then that set me up to be editor in chief. So like that's sort of what has to happen, right? It's like I want that to be the norm, right? Like we want you get here and you have a space to continue to move up. At the same time, I was talking to someone who a professor on campus who I love. She's a phenomenal. I've done some photography work for the accounting club in McCoy, but named Dr. Khan. And we were talking, and she sent me an email, and she said something along the lines of like, "You're not going to be able to change racism in a year. Like it's not going to happen. But what you can do is continue to move the ball forward." And hearing that, that helped me a little bit, because it's like you do sort of feel like you have to undo 100+ years of what the norm has been for so long. But knowing that some people sort of understand what's going on here, and how much really does go into it, that helps me a little bit. But the task is big, but it's not just me, and I got to realize that this is something that I have to hold everybody accountable to help me with this, right? Like this is something the job of everybody, even white staff members. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm at with that.
Well, I will say, friend to friend, I think you have been doing a good job thus far. Like I hear like the story about like Carrington and you and how he helped you, and it's kind of funny because like he said me to you. He was like, I met him at a career fair, and like like I wasn't even gonna go that day. A friend of mine, we were leaving FDOM, we were leaving that class, and she was like, "Hey, you want to come to the career fair?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll give it a shot." I didn't even know it was that day, and we went, and I saw Carrington, and I was like, "Hey," because I had met him at like a hearing about like HBCUs versus like PWIs, and he was just like on that panel, and he was just talking about it, and I saw him. I was like, "Hey, like I met you here, like it was nice to hear you, like you're really smart. I'm happy you carry yourself in this way, and like you set a good example for other people about like Black people, and you making us all look good by like the work that you're doing." So I was just like, "Thank you." And he was like, "Hey, like what's your name, like what do you do?" And I just told him, about like my credentials and stuff, and he was like, I'm gonna send you to Jaden, like, because I tried to apply in the last fall, but I never
Right.
made it through. And he was like, "Man, let me send you to Jaden. Like, we're gonna like you should be at the Star." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I'll try. I don't know if." He's like, "No, like you're gonna be at the Star. Like, don't worry, I'll get you in there." And then like with you, and then like starting out in multimedia, and then finding my way here, it's a blessing. And I will say, like from my experience, that you've done a good job in like passing the torch and just setting up that next generation. And
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, that's what it's all about, man. Character, that's somebody who I still, I think that's sort of what it is too. Like even when I leave here, is like still being a resource to, Black students. Sort of how, me and Carrington, we have a really, I call him all the time. We talk all the time just about journalism and, stuff like that as well. So it's important, it's just we gotta look out for one another, everybody, all Black people, right? It's already hard. So, we gotta look out for one another, and that's sort of how I see it, right? And that's what this is all about. And even as I leave, always being a resource to whoever calls, whoever needs anything, like being able to provide. That's the next level right after you leave, right? Is giving back, right? And passing down the things that you learn once you do leave. So yeah.
Well, Jaden, I had a lot of fun with you. We're almost out of time. I'm gonna let you go home and get some sleep, get some food. I know you're hungry. So
Doing all right.
yeah. But I had a pleasure having you on, bro. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited for, the Star Sit Down and everything that we're gonna be able to make and produce over this upcoming year. So thank you.
Likewise, thanks for allowing us. Well, I guess this is a little history since the first episode. Let me be a part of history here, so I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward. We're gonna continue to keep this thing flowing and rolling, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, appreciate it, man. It's been fun.
All right, dog. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, peace.
Peace.